Hi guys, so far we've learned what impulse control disorders are, how we diagnose and measure them, and we've seen the specific criteria for each disorder. But now comes one of the most fascinating questions in all of psychology. Why do some people develop these disorders while others don't? What's actually happening inside the brain of someone who can't resist stealing things they don't want, or setting fires, or gambling away their life savings? Today, we're looking into the biological explanation, how brain chemistry and genetics can create vulnerability to these conditions. We're going to explore the incredible world of neurotransmitters, reward pathways, and genetic factors that can literally rewire someone's brain. So let's move on. By the end of this lesson, you're going to understand the neuroscience behind impulse control disorders. First, you'll understand how dopamine and reward pathways normally function in the brain. This isn't just about feeling good. Dopamine is involved in motivation, wanting, and the drive to act. Understanding the normal system helps us see what goes wrong in these disorders. You'll understand reward deficiency syndrome, the main biological theory for impulse control disorders. This explains how some people might be born with reward systems that don't work as efficiently, making them vulnerable to seeking extreme behaviors. You'll analyze the genetic evidence, particularly research on the A1 allele of the D2 receptor gene. This shows how specific genetic variants can affect someone's risk of developing these disorders. It's like having a genetic predisposition. And you'll evaluate compelling real-world evidence from Parkinson's disease research that shows directly how changing brain chemistry can cause or cure impulse control problems. This is like having a natural experiment that proves the biological connection. Right, let's start by understanding how the brain's reward system normally works. Because you need to understand the normal system before you can understand what goes wrong. Understanding how the brain's reward system normally works is necessary for understanding what goes wrong in impulse control disorders. The key player is dopamine, often called the pleasure molecule, but that's actually misleading. Dopamine isn't really about pleasure, it's about motivation, wanting things, and the drive to act. Think of dopamine like the accelerator pedal in your car. When it's working properly, you can control your speed and direction. But when it's broken, you might not be able to stop, or you might accelerate when you don't want to. Normally, these reward pathways motivate adaptive behaviors that help us survive and thrive. Things like eating when we're hungry, socializing with others, working toward important goals, caring for our children. The system is designed to make us feel motivated to do things that are good for us and our species. It's like having an internal guidance system that points us toward healthy behaviors. These reward pathways are located in key brain areas with names you might recognize: the nucleus accumbens, the ventral tegmental area, and connections to the prefrontal cortex. You don't need to memorize these names, but understanding that there are specific brain circuits involved helps you see that this is real neuroscience, not just theory. To further elaborate, let's look into some examples. This classic study revealed just how powerful the brain's reward system can be when it's artificially stimulated. Back in 1954, researchers called Olds and Milner did an experiment that changed our understanding of motivation forever. They put rats in boxes with levers, and when the rats pressed the levers, the researchers electrically stimulated parts of their brains that are rich in dopamine, the reward centers. Essentially, they were giving the rats direct brain pleasure on demand. The results were shocking. The rats became completely obsessed with lever pressing. They would press the levers up to 2,000 times per hour. That's more than once every 2 seconds, for hours on end. They even ignored food and water to keep pressing the lever. Some rats literally pressed until they collapsed from exhaustion. This showed just how powerful brain reward systems can be. They could override basic survival needs like eating and drinking. The rats weren't just enjoying the stimulation, they were desperately craving it. This was the first clear demonstration that you could create something like addiction by directly stimulating reward pathways in the brain. Now, what does this have to do with humans and impulse control disorders? Let me explain the connection. The principles discovered in animal research help us further correlate with humans. In humans, these same pathways are involved in normal motivation and goal seeking, but they're also involved in addiction and impulse control problems. When someone feels motivated to work toward a goal, or excited about an upcoming event, or craves their morning coffee, that's all dopamine working in these reward circuits. Here's what's really important to understand: dopamine creates wanting and anticipation, not just pleasure. It's the neurochemical that drives us to seek rewards. It's like having an internal engine that pushes us toward things we think will make us feel good. Normally, this system helps us pursue beneficial goals. But in impulse control disorders, these pathways become hijacked by problematic behaviors. Instead of feeling motivated by healthy activities, people get their biggest dopamine hits from stealing, setting fires, or gambling. Their internal guidance system has been reprogrammed to point toward harmful behaviors instead of helpful ones. This brings us to the main biological theory for impulse control disorders: reward deficiency syndrome. This explains why some people are more vulnerable to developing impulse control disorders. The basic idea is that some people are born with fewer dopamine receptors or lower dopamine activity in their reward pathways. These people might need more intense experiences to feel the same level of satisfaction that others get from normal activities. When your reward system is dampened, normal activities don't provide enough stimulation to feel satisfying. Imagine if your taste buds were less sensitive. You might need much saltier or sweeter food to taste anything. Similarly, people with reward deficiency might unconsciously seek out more extreme behaviors to get the dopamine release they need to feel normal. This leads them to seek out more extreme behaviors to achieve the reward levels that others get from everyday activities. Instead of getting satisfaction from a nice meal or good conversation, they might need the intense stimulation of gambling, stealing, or fire setting. It's not that they want to be harmful, their brains are just wired to need more intense stimulation. Now let's look at the specific genetic evidence that supports this theory. This genetic research provides verification for the biological basis of impulse control disorders with correlations to genetic variants. Researchers have identified a specific genetic variant called the A1 allele of the D2 receptor gene. People who carry this variant develop about 30% fewer dopamine receptors in key brain areas. Think of dopamine receptors like parking spaces for dopamine molecules. If you have fewer parking spaces, less dopamine can have an effect. Here's the striking evidence. This A1 allele is found in 51% of people with gambling disorder, but only 25% of the general population. That's more than double the rate. This suggests that having fewer dopamine receptors significantly increases your risk of developing impulse control problems. It's like having a genetic vulnerability. This provides a clear biological basis for vulnerability to these disorders. But it's important to understand that genetics isn't destiny. Not everyone with the A1 allele develops problems, and some people without it still do. It's more like having a genetic predisposition.
Quick pause. If you're finding value in this explanation, there's so much more to discover at Alt Academy, where we break down every A-level concept with the same clarity. Now back to the video lesson.
It increases your risk, but environmental factors matter too. Let me give you a perfect real-world example that shows exactly how brain chemistry affects impulse control: Parkinson's disease research. This provides compelling proof for the biological basis of impulse control disorders, because we can see what happens when we deliberately change brain chemistry. Parkinson's disease is caused by the progressive death of dopamine-producing neurons in the brain. People with Parkinson's have severely low dopamine levels, which causes problems with movement, motivation, and mood. The main treatment for Parkinson's involves drugs called dopamine agonists, which increase dopamine activity in the brain. These drugs help with the movement problems and improve motivation and mood. But here's the fascinating and tragic part. Many people with Parkinson's who take these dopamine drugs develop impulse control disorders, which they never had before in their lives. Elderly people who were never gamblers suddenly start gambling compulsively. People who never had shopping problems start spending thousands on unnecessary items. Others develop compulsive sexual behaviors or eating disorders. Now let's move on to the significance of this research. Before diving into the details, it's important to remember that Parkinson's research was based on a natural experiment, indicating a biological connection. The Parkinson's research shows a direct causal relationship between dopamine levels and impulse control. When dopamine is too low in untreated Parkinson's, people lose motivation and drive. When it's artificially increased with medication, some people develop impulse control disorders. This isn't just correlation, it's causation. Even more compelling, these impulse control behaviors usually disappear when the dopamine medication is stopped or reduced. This shows that the behaviors are directly tied to the brain chemistry changes, not to personality or life circumstances. It's like having a switch that can turn impulse control problems on and off. This gives us what scientists call a natural experiment, a situation where changing one biological factor, dopamine levels, predictably changes behavior, impulse control. This is some of the strongest evidence possible for the biological basis of these disorders. It's like having a controlled experiment happening in real life. Now let's critically evaluate this biological explanation, because like all scientific theories, it has both strengths and limitations. Understanding both the strengths and limitations of this explanation helps us think critically about what it can and cannot tell us. The biological explanation has several major strengths. There's strong research evidence from multiple sources: animal studies, genetic research, neuroimaging, and the Parkinson's disease evidence. It explains why some people seem more vulnerable to these disorders from birth. And it gives these conditions medical validity, helping reduce stigma by showing their genuine medical conditions. But there are also limitations. The explanation is quite reductionist. It reduces complex human behavior to just brain chemistry. It doesn't fully explain why people with genetic vulnerability don't always develop disorders, or why these disorders often start after specific life events rather than being present from birth. The biological explanation also doesn't fully account for environmental triggers or psychological factors. Why do some people with reward deficiency become gamblers while others become kleptomaniacs? Why do these disorders often start after trauma, stress, or major life changes? Biology alone can't answer these questions. Let me also discuss how this biological understanding applies to real-world treatment and prevention. This has important implications for how we think about treatment and prevention. Understanding the biological basis helps reduce stigma by showing that these are genuine medical conditions, not moral failings or lack of willpower. When people understand that someone's brain chemistry contributes to their behavior, it's easier to respond with compassion rather than judgment. It's like understanding that someone with diabetes isn't just weak around sugar. This understanding suggests that biological treatments like medication might be helpful for some people. If the problem is partly due to brain chemistry, then medications that modify brain chemistry, like the opiate antagonist we'll learn about later, might be effective treatments. The biological explanation also helps explain why willpower alone often isn't enough to overcome these disorders. If someone's reward system is fundamentally different, simply trying harder won't fix the underlying biological vulnerability. They need interventions that address the biological factors as well as psychological and social ones. Let me also mention some important considerations about genetic testing and prevention. Understanding genetic factors raises interesting questions about testing and prevention. Genetic testing for the A1 allele is theoretically possible, but it raises important ethical questions. Would you want to know if you carry a gene variant that increases your risk? Should insurance companies have access to this information? Should parents test their children? These are complex ethical issues with no easy answers. It's crucial to understand that having genetic risk doesn't mean a disorder will definitely develop. Most people with the A1 allele never develop impulse control disorders. Environmental factors, life experiences, and other genes all play important roles. Genetics loads the gun, but environment pulls the trigger. However, genetic knowledge could potentially inform prevention strategies and early intervention. If we know someone has biological vulnerability, we might be able to help them develop better coping strategies, avoid high risk situations, or get early treatment if problems start developing. To better understand this topic, let's look into its integration with other explanations. Several perspectives can be considered here. The biological explanation shows how genetics and brain chemistry create vulnerability to impulse control disorders. But biology doesn't determine behavior alone. It's like having a car with faulty brakes. You're more likely to have accidents, but careful driving and avoiding dangerous situations can still prevent problems. Environmental factors often determine whether biological vulnerability becomes an actual disorder. Stress, trauma, exposure to gambling or other risk behaviors, cultural factors, and life circumstances all play crucial roles. Biology sets the stage, but experience writes the script. The best understanding of impulse control disorders combines biological, psychological, and social factors. We need to understand the brain chemistry and the learning processes and the life circumstances that contribute to these complex conditions. It's like understanding a car accident. You need to know about mechanical problems and driver behavior and road conditions. Let me bring all this biological information together because we've covered some complex neuroscience today. Here are the key takeaways. Reward deficiency syndrome explains biological vulnerability to impulse control disorders. Some people are born with fewer dopamine receptors or lower dopamine activity, meaning they need more intense stimulation to feel normal levels of satisfaction. This can lead them to seek extreme behaviors unconsciously. There's strong genetic evidence supporting this theory. The A1 allele of the D2 receptor gene is found in twice as many people with gambling disorder compared to the general population. This provides clear biological evidence for genetic vulnerability to these conditions. Research on Parkinson's disease provides compelling proof of the causal relationship between dopamine levels and impulse control. When dopamine medication is given, some people develop impulse control disorders. When it's stopped, the behaviors usually disappear. This is strong evidence for biological causation. That wraps up our exploration of the biological explanation for impulse control disorders. Next time, we'll look at the psychological explanations. How learning and memory can create these compulsive behavioral patterns even in people without biological vulnerability.
Hey there! If you found this A-level psychology lesson helpful, why don't you head on over to altacademy.org where you can sign up for the full A-level psychology course. In addition to psychology, we offered 7 other A-level subjects. Thousands of students have already taken the leap. What are you waiting for? I want to see you there.